For nearly a century after the Civil War, African Americans were systematically denied the rights promised to them by the United States Constitution, exposing a profound failure in the nation's responsibility to ensure equality under the law. Although the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment granted citizenship, and the 15th Amendment protected voting rights. Southern states quickly found ways to undermine these guarantees through Jim Crow's laws and racial terror. Segregation became legally enforced in schools, transportations, housing, workplaces, and public spaces, creating two separate societies that were deeply unequal. African Americans were forced into overcrowded and underfunded schools, restricted to low-paying jobs, and denied access to quality housing and healthcare. Voting restrictions such as poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses prevented millions from participating in democracy, allowing white supremacist lawmakers to remain in power. Violence and intimidation, including lynchings and attacks by groups like the Ku Klux Klan, reinforced racial control and discouraged resistance. The Supreme Court further failed in its responsibility when it upheld segregation in the 1986 Plessy v. Ferguson decision, claiming that separate but not equal facilities were constitutional, even though equality was never enforced. This ruling legalized discrimination for decades and signaled that the federal government would not protect African American civil rights. Despite this hostile environment, African Americans continued to resist through legal challenges, community organizations, and institutions such as black churches and colleges. Organizations like the NAACP worked tirelessly to challenge segregation in the courts, culminating in the landmark 1954 Brown v. Board Education decision, which ruled that segregation in public schools were unconstitutional. However, massive resistance from the southern states revealed that legal victories without enforcement were insufficient. Rights and the government's failure to act responsibly created the conditions that made the civil rights movement not only necessary, but inevitable as African Americans began demanding that the nation honor its democratic promises.
As the reality of denied rights became impossible to ignore, African Americans embraced their responsibility to confront injustice directly through organized nonviolent action, transforming the civil rights movement into a nationwide struggle for equality. Following Brown v. Board of Education, many white communities resisted desegregation, forcing activists to take change into their own hands. The movement gained national momentum in 1955 when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama, leading to her arrest and sparking the Montgomery bus boycott. Under the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., African Americans boycotted public transportations for over a year, demonstrating extraordinary discipline, unity, and commitment to this nonviolence. This success inspired similar efforts across the country as citizens recognized their responsibility to challenge unjust laws peacefully. In the early 1960s, student activists played a crucial role by staging sit-ins at a segregated lunch counters, beginning with the Greensboro Fort in North Carolina. These young protesters faced arrest, harassment, and violence, yet remained nonviolent, proving that ordinary citizens could force social change. Freedom riders risked their lives traveling through the South to challenge segregation on interstate buses, facing brutal attacks, while drawing national attention to the federal government's failure to enforce its own laws. The movement continued to grow, through mass marches, voter registration drives, and community organizing, even as protesters were met with police dogs, fire hoses, and mass incarceration. Televised images of this brutality shocked the American public and exposed the moral contradiction between the nation's ideals and its actions. The movement reached a historic climax in 1963 during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where over 250,000 people gathered peacefully to demand civil rights legislation. Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech captured the moral urgency of the movement, emphasizing both the right to equality and the shared responsibility of Americans to build a just society.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
By courageously claiming their rights, activists forced the nation to confront its failures and demand federal action.
For a long time, the U.S. government didn't do much to protect the rights of black citizens. That changed because of race activists who refused to give up. Their hard work and persistence forced the government to finally take responsibility for equality. In 1963, John F. Kennedy proposed a major law to end segregation, but he was assassinated before it could be passed. President Lyndon B. Johnson took over and used his political skill to push the bill forward. Even though some Southern senators tried to block it by talking for 54 days straight, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was finally signed into law. This law was a huge deal because it outlawed segregation in public places like restaurants and hotels, banned discrimination in hiring, and gave the federal government the power to make sure schools were interrogated. However, the struggle was over. African Americans still face huge barriers when they try to vote, especially in the South. It led to more activism, including the famous marches from Selma to Montgomery. Together, these laws transformed American democracy. They didn't just help African Americans, they also paved the way for the future movements involving women's rights, disability rights, and LGBTQ rights. The legacy of civil rights movement reminds us that laws are a great start, but we have to keep working for justice to make sure everyone is actually treated equally.
In conclusion, the civil rights movement stands as one of the most powerful struggles for justice and equality in American history. It was a movement driven not only by well-known leaders, but also by ordinary men, women, and children who were willing to risk their safety for their freedom, and even their lives to challenge unfair laws and deeply rooted discrimination. Through nonviolent protests, marches, boycotts, and courageous acts of resistance, African Americans and their allies forced the nation to confront the reality of segregation, voter suppression, and racial violence. Their determination revealed that injustice could no longer be ignored or accepted as normal. The civil rights movement reformed our world by transforming laws, social attitudes, and the meaning of equality both in the United States and globally.